Welcome to Manhwa and Keop, spoilers ahead, so be careful. A huge shout out and special thanks to all the channel members. Let's get into it. The story starts by introducing us to the world of the dead, Necropolis. Not a single trace of life exists, but a massive castle stands in this barren land, desolate and empty. The only castle in Necropolis contains unimaginable things, endless golden pillars, beautiful ornaments, and murals. The marble hall stretches beneath intricate and glorious sculptures, and the symbol of absolute power, the master of everything, the absolute ruler of Necropolis, the king of undeath himself, Karnak. The one who transcended everything and controlled death itself, finally realized, after a century, that humans weren't meant to control things like death. Back in his human days, Karnak was the bastard son of a fallen noble family. He lost his mother young and faced pressure from other nobles, growing up to trust only himself, strengthening his body to earn respect. Then he stumbled upon a forbidden codex related to necromancy, and strayed from the path of humanity. Shortly after, Karnak led all humans into the realm of death. The fourth martial king and the three great mages resisted him, but it was all useless, as he turned them into his own subjects. The guardians of the world also tried to stop him, avengers of the fantasy world. But when he converted the last remaining world guardian, the dragon emperor Grateria, into his subject, he transformed his own flesh into the ultimate descendant, Astrasiaf, and thus was born the strongest death king to ever exist. We hear him say he thought everything was his, and that he could finally enjoy it, but it's been 70 years since then, and he wonders what he can do with a body that's only made of bones, and that he doesn't want this meaningless act to continue. He says he misses the warm breeze outside and the warmth of other humans. Even stabbing a knife into his own flesh or gouging out his eyes would be better than this empty life he leads now, but still, there's hope, because he has a plan for something even greater. We hear the footsteps of some knights. As a man greets Karnak, he's the commander-in-chief of the legions of death, called Baros. Karnak tells him the preparations are ready, and Baros asks if the time has finally come. Karnak laughs and says yes, he's got a good feeling about this. Baros starts getting excited, and Karnak explains he's been searching for a way to regain the pleasures of the flesh with Baros's help. He's tried both vampirism and possession, but the pleasures work by supplementing what he still lacks. For ascended beings like them, no method could satisfy their needs. However, as the last ascended ones, they could find a way to recover their pleasure. They can't enjoy human pleasures because they're not human anymore. He must go back in time to the days when he was, oh man, we love regression stories. He says he'll probably return to the time when he first obtained the mana of darkness. Baros asks what happens if they fail. Baros asks if failing means their existence will disappear. Karnak asks why that matters, asking if he still has regrets. Baros says no and laughs, saying it's all or nothing. Time to drop this shit. As they both touch their stone tablet, Karnak starts thinking about the life he lived when he was human. He begins to slowly open his eyes, and a blonde man tells him to please wake up. The man asks if he's awake, and Karnak says it's a familiar face, asking Baros if it's him. Baros says yes, and that it's been a while since he'd seen his face, and says his warm and pompous face is just like he had in the past. Karnak says he still has no sense of respect. He gets up from the ground, saying if they arrived at the right time, then it should be now when he obtained the mana of darkness. He looks at a table, confirming it, saying this was the beginning of everything. He walked the path of necromancy with the knowledge from this codex. He decides to try something. He snaps his fingers, and a purple aura spreads toward the book, wrapping it in flames. He tells Baros this is all the power he has now. Baros asks if it's really okay to burn this, and Karnak says yes, since he remembers everything anyway. Although it's a forbidden codex, it's not really that important. It's just the basics. It's better to get rid of it than leave the possibility of someone else finding it. Baros says he sees he's planned everything out. As Karnak looks proud, Baros says he looks more handsome than usual. Karnak stares at him, and they hold an awkward silence for a second until his stomach growls. Karnak says he hasn't heard this sound in a long time. Baros asks if that means they can finally enjoy food. And they leave their little cave, super excited to find something to eat. We cut to a tavern and hear Baros screaming at the top of his lungs how good the food is. Some of the other tavern customers look at him a bit concerned as he sits. They're crying while eating bread. Well, so is Karnak too. Laughing, he didn't expect food to attack his eyes like this, saying he could have a heart attack. But he can't die from this so soon in their new lives. Baros says risking their lives was worth it, and he knows that too. Karnak also cries and says he knows how he feels, but he needs to watch how much he eats, since money doesn't fall from the sky. At a nearby table, the waiter drops off a whole roasted chicken. Instinctively, they both turn and can't believe how beautiful it is. Karnak considers the possibility of killing everyone at the table to take their food, but Baros stops him, saying they'd get their asses beat with their current physique. Karnak realizes he's probably right. Baros says being poor is a sin. He opens his money pouch and, completely surprised, tells Karnak there's a problem. Karnak asks what's wrong, and Baros says the time travel has messed things up. Karnak says that's very strange, and Baros agrees, saying there's no way they should have this much money. Karnak starts wondering where things went wrong. Back then, his family, the Gestars, had poor financial status, and his grandfather, Baron Greeley, started many businesses with the territory as collateral and failed, only leaving debts to his father, Baron Krapud. Unfortunately, his father didn't have the ability to deal with the growing debts, and the two sons from his original wife were helpless brats who couldn't help the family. The bastard son who was born into a crumbling family, received all the contempt and persecution from this family and barely managed to hang on each day. That's how the family status should be, at least. So he's truly curious about where the hell all this money came from, and this isn't something to be happy about. Saying maybe his time regression spell went wrong. Baros says he's not sure. Asking what a swordsman is supposed to know, Karnak starts scratching his head, saying maybe they didn't regress to the past. But he says it's strange since there are many similarities with his memory. Baros says then this means they can eat chicken and his whole mood starts to change. Karnak says there's no point in not doing it. Baros says they should at least order one, and Karnak says no way, they're ordering one for each of them, and they order 2 whole chickens. Later we see Baros has turned into a pig and is now super round. While talking about entering a food coma, Karnak says the manor calls for them. Baros says the fact that he has to see that again is annoying. The family must be the same as always. Karnak says they'll be fine as long as they kiss ass. But the problem is how strange the situation is. Baros agrees, saying not just 1 or 2 things are weird. The horse is also strange. Asking if he saw how the stable keeper put on the crystals, it makes no sense that a fallen family would have horses of such good breed. The citizens they ran into earlier too, normally they'd bark at them. However, they were super surprised since they treated them super kindly. Karnak says it's definitely an uncomfortable feeling and lets out a sigh. Baros says they'll figure it out when they get home. Since they're almost there, Karnak looks at his family estate and says it's nostalgic because it's been a while since he's seen it. Baros is still annoyed. We learned that Baros was also an orphan, so he didn't have a comfortable life. His parents were absolute bastards who abandoned him in the middle of the night when he was a kid, and Karnak found him dying of hunger alone on the street. And after taking him to the family, his father allowed it. Even though he was an illegitimate son, the family had to keep up appearances, so they allowed Baros to be his servant. Baros pulls him from his thoughts and tells him to look over there. That's definitely the guest residence. Karnak says obviously, but they see it's super luxurious. And Baros says maybe they came to the wrong place. But Karnak says no, it's definitely the same as his memories. There's a high brick wall, a 2-story building with a terrace and an extensive garden surrounding it. Everything's the same except for the fact that it's very well maintained and looks super clean. Karnak wonders where they got the money for this. One of the guards calls to Karnak, calling him young master, and Karnak is surprised that even the gate guard welcomes him. One of the other guards reminds him that's not how to address him, and then they bow, calling him their lord. Karnak and Baros are completely bewildered, wondering what the hell happened. Shortly after, we hear a man say it's been half a year since he became the head of the family as he serves tea, asking them if they achieved their goal. It's the head butler called Gapel play. Karnak is confused about what he means by goal, and Gapel says surely that's why he went on the journey. Karnak says yes, and Gapel is glad, saying the late lord and lady would be happy. Karnak is surprised his father and stepmother are dead. We also learn his 2 younger brothers have perished too. Gapel says he feels better now, knowing the family is in good hands. Karnak now realizes why he became the lord, and wonders why his whole family died. The purpose of his journey is obvious. It must have been to master necromancy while no one was watching. Baros says it's strange he didn't think Karnak would reveal his goals so openly. Karnak says that's why he said some nonsense about embarking on a journey, but he asks why he'd need necromancy in a situation like this. GP asks them what they're worried about in a super bright tone. Baros explains that Karnak is exhausted from the trip, so maybe they can talk tomorrow? This bro deserves an Oscar. Gapel apologizes, saying he didn't consider that, and tells him to please rest in his room and leaves. They high-five to celebrate Gapel is gone. Baros says they got rid of him for now, but they'll have to deal with him later, and everything he said was new to them. Karnak says there's a good method for times like this, saying surely he knows what they must prepare for now, and they need to hurry and move while everyone sleeps at just the right time. Night arrives and we see Gapel sleeping in his bed, and Baros says he's completely out, and he's prepared the herbs, handing them to Karnak, and Karnak says it's time to begin the mental inspection. He starts invoking his aura into the bowl, creating a black miasma that starts seeping into Gapel's nose, and says, "Wake up my servant." Gapel instantly opens his eyes, saying, "Yes, master," and Karnak tells him to explain the whole process of Gestar's finances and how he came to be the head of the house. Gapel says 4 years ago, while the second young master was training, he happened to stumble upon a larger-scale copper mine. Karnak says he thought mines were just an excuse nobles used to hide dirty money, and Baros says he guesses this was one of those rare cases where they actually did it. Karnak asks how his whole family died, and Gapel says the problem was the location of the copper mine. It was located in the neutral zone between the Gestar family and the Devontor family. Both families claimed the mine was theirs, and this conflict led to a war between them. The Devontors had always been consistent with their military plans, and they were too powerful. Since there was no one who could defeat Sir Randall, and he finished off Craig easily in battle, and even killed the eldest son of the Sill family, the best knight of the house and second. Master lost both his legs because of Sir Randall, and because of this he took his own life. The Baroness was shocked by all this and passed away shortly after. In the end, young master Karnak was chosen as successor despite being underage, and the two families promised a ceasefire until he came of age and became the official head of the house. However, everyone was worried about the copper mine and the promise of war compensation. That's when young master Karnak came up with a solution to save the family. He requested a trial duel against Viscount Deventor in the name of Elium, the goddess of moon and justice. Karnak is very surprised by this, and Baros says that's reckless. The trial duel is a duel carried out under the mandates of the Order of Elium. It's possible to substitute a warrior in your place. It's carried out in the presence of the priest of Elium and Deventor, and the winner is only declared through the death of one of the parties. Baros says Karnak dug his own grave, and Karnak sighs, saying it wasn't even him. No wonder everyone likes him. Baros says it's a lost fight, that's why. He must have chosen this path instead of continuing the war, and Deventor couldn't refuse since it was an offer that would ruin their image if they did. If he won the duel and secured the copper mine, it would have helped them avoid starvation. Baros says with his current skill level, he's definitely going to die. Karnak says that's why he'll do everything possible to prepare. He asks Gepel when the duel is, and Gepel says there's only a month left. His neck starts hurting, and he says that's way too close. We jump to a table full of food, and Baros asks what this is. Karnak says he prepared it for him since he's always worked hard, so he deserves it. He starts eating, and asks if it's okay for him to be resting when the duel date is so close, and Karnak says he should attend in his place. Baros realizes they only gave him this food as a bribe and says he doesn't think he can do it. Karnak begs him, saying he's killed 3 of the 4 martial kings, and Baros explains it was only thanks to his necromancy, and you don't acquire martial skill just from experience. He explains there's no point in learning advanced swordsmanship if you don't have weapons, and he'd be able to do it if he had half a year. But there's no way he could do it in a month. Karnak takes the food away, saying stop eating then. Baros asks him why he doesn't find someone in the Order of Knights. Karnak says he wouldn't be here if there was anyone with enough talent in the order. Baros says he only has one option left. He has to use his necromancy, and now he understands why he learned it. However, Karnak says there's a problem. Necromancy is forbidden. He asks Baros if he remembers when they fled in the past and managed to eliminate the house, stealthily using necromancy. But the priest of the Elium order pointed him out as guilty, since they were sure he was a necromancer. After being detained by some knights, Karnak starts summoning some wandering souls to erase the fates of the living, using the light of the abyss. When we see him summon some specters, they all realize instantly they were right and that he's the necromancer. Since he's using dark magic, they start flying toward the priest who tries to use his guardian. Plates that are from the Elium order, but his blessings are useless, as we see them get cut in half by the specters. Karnak waves his hand, sending these specters toward the knights, instantly taking them down too. Karnak tells Baros they need to leave before the rest catch up, and he wonders how they knew it was him using necromancy. Baros reads him saying only civilians wouldn't know, mages and knights would, and he thinks people like the priest are an exception. Karnak is surprised by this. Baros laughs, remembering that, saying it was a very tough time. But now he understands the plan. Baros says they should get some money and run. Karnak says that would be a shame. All the relatives he hated died, and people here like him. Baros asks if he plans to keep acting like a good patriarch, and says he can do it and just prepare for his funeral. Karnak says it's not an act and tells him to sit back down, saying it might be dangerous, but he has an idea. We jump to the northern Deventor fort as we see men training, and they're all super jacked except one. That's Randall. Someone asks him how the duel preparations are going. We learn he's called Britta, and Randall asks why he'd need to make preparations to beat someone so inexperienced. Britta says that's true, but he shouldn't let his guard down. And Randall says it's ridiculous he has to waste time like this because of some spoiled young lord who knows nothing about the world. Britta says he doesn't think Randall will lose, but the new lord must have some plan for sure. We see a merchant selling stuff outside in their courtyard, and Britta says it's a distraction and tells everyone to return to their posts. Turns out the merchant is none other than Baros, who says he understands the plan. Baros says it was good they decided to snoop around here, and Randall might be powerful in combat, but in a one-on-one battle, his opponent actually has a chance of winning. He's the simple-minded type who uses typical heavy sword techniques, and he hasn't even learned aura yet. It's easy to predict the movements of people like him, and it's good he came here, and there's at least another month until the duel, but he doesn't think it's enough time. Then a woman calls him, asking if he has business with her brother Randall. He gets excited, asking if that means she's his little sister, and she responds by asking what business he has with him. He tells her he was captivated by the vigor of the North's strongest knight, and shows her all his handkerchiefs, asking if she wants one. She picks one, saying that one looks good, and Baros hopes she hasn't figured it out yet. Back at the training hall of the Gestar estate, Baros says he's back, asking Karnak if his endurance training is going well. Karnak has died and is now the end of mummy. Baros shakes him, telling him to wake up, and Karnak tells him to stop before he throws up again. Baros asks if he ran 50 laps like he was told. Karnak says yes, but he passed out and can't run anymore. Baros says his stamina is way too low, and Karnak asks if there's any reason he should train. Like this, Baros says right now he can't do anything with his shrimp body, and it makes no sense, so keep at it. Karnak says he needs to rest first. Baros gets serious and says the real training starts now. Karnak asks what he was doing just now then. Baros tells him that was just rehabilitation, since it's time to start the real training, and Karnak cries like a demon. There are 20 days until the duel. First thing they do is eat a hearty breakfast in the morning. After that, they go to the exercise hall and do 100 push-ups, then pair it with 100 pole swings, and then 100 squats. And after that, a break. They cook broth then. After eating another heavy meal, more push-ups, more pole swings, then squats and repeat. We see there are now 15 days until the match, and he's now moved onto using sandbags as weight for his squats. Baros says it looks like he's finally built up some stamina, and Karnak says of course he's trained a lot, though he's still lacking compared to Baros, and Baros says that's because he's done twice the training he has and it's time to start the swordplay part. Baros hands him a sword and then starts thinking about it, saying it's a disaster, saying his arms are shaking and he needs to relax his shoulders, and starts giving him instructions on how to fix his posture. Karnak follows his instructions and calls him strict, but Baros says he finally looks decent, and if he keeps this posture he won't be defeated in a single strike. Baros then tells him to get ready, because he's going to attack him now. Karnak says he's ready to counter. Baros strikes, but Karnak is too slow to do anything and gets hit in the stomach. Baros asks what he's doing and tells him to get back into position. He strikes him again, but Karnak fails to block him again and again until he finally hits the ground, all because of Baros using only a stick. And he says this is why knights can have a field day against civilians. They don't give their opponents a chance to counter, and he has to hold his posture and dodge the next attack. Karnak says even if he does that, he can't dodge. Baros says of course, and to be honest, the goal of this training is to show his will to fight to Randall. And Karnak asks if there's a need for him to do that in a duel. Baros explains that Randall has a habit of showing off, so he'll try to display his skills in front of spectators while playing with his opponents. However, it's different if his opponent loses their will to fight, and a prolonged fight will damage his honor. So if he notices he lacks the will, he'll decapitate him instantly, and that's why he needs to show him he won't surrender, and if he does, he won't die. Torn apart in the duel, Karnak looks very nervous, and we're now at 5 days. We see him charging forward with a shield in hand, and he hits Baros, who blocks it, telling him he can do better than this, then hits Karnak, who steps back, telling him to yell louder and make sure he's heard. Karnak blocks the attack with a shield and still goes flying across the arena as he rolls against a wall, and Baros tells him don't even dream about taking a hit, because it'll kill him and he should always roll on the ground. Karnak is exhausted and says he's going to look stupid. The next day, Baros hits him and Karnak does exactly the same, rolling on the ground. Same on day 3. We see him roll, but even faster. With 2 days left until the fight, we see him roll to escape the attack, but he manages to recover his posture. Karnak says he might end up dying before fighting Randall. Baros says with this he thinks he's almost ready, and it's time to move to the final part, since he now has a sword, since he's going to teach him the 4 sword techniques of the martial kings. Karnak is surprised he knows such a thing, and Baros sighs, saying he knows most of the techniques. The 4 martial kings were all his subordinates after all, and he's learned all their techniques except for Martial King Rapisol's. Karnak asks why he didn't learn hers, and Baros says he never turned her into a death knight. She resisted until the end, so he cut her in thirds and turned her into a palace guardian. Karnak thinks about it, wondering if he did that, saying that sounds really cruel. Baros says what he'll learn today is the martial sword technique of the Pialian king. Karnak asks if it's possible to do it with only 2 days left, and Baros says they only need 1 to start. The day has arrived and we see the arena on the border of the territories, and some of the Devontor citizens are talking about the one-sided match it's going to be, while the citizens on Karnak's side are all rooting for him since he's been training hard. On cue, Karnak appears, saying it's time to begin. When the crowd starts getting louder, Gandalf approaches and strikes a staff against the ground, saying to keep quiet in the presence of Aliyah. Both houses have claimed ownership of the copper mines, and therefore have requested a trial, and here it'll be decided who keeps it. He calls Karnak of House Gestar to present himself and face the goddess, as well as Randall of Mentor to present himself. Before the fight, according to the rules, a handicap is applied to the equipment based on the fighter's abilities. The priest asks that both plan to fight honorably and both swear to it. The priest says now with the warrior's oath may the scales of justice seek the truth, and it's time for the trial to begin, as we see them stare each other down. Finally, they separate a bit, and Randall says this won't change anything as he charges directly at Karnak, who manages to block the attack, saying they'll only know when they see things through. He strikes Randall, making him step back, saying he's glad it's not all talk. Randall launches into attack instantly, and Karnak blocks another attack with his shield. The citizens are surprised he's fighting decently, saying they knew there was something different about him. Baros says it's going as expected. He's starting not so threatening, and he can easily tell that Randall is still probing his opponent. Karnak says that's good and he should stick to what he's trained for. Right now he'll show his will to Randall as he lets out a war cry, telling him to come at him. Randall smiles, saying his eyes are full of determination. And though his skills are lacking, he's got spirit. He decides to step it up and starts using sword energy, which is distinct from aura. Karnak realizes this and says he can't block this with his shield anymore. Randall's attack comes, but Karnak manages to roll away using his max speed roll while screaming. He gets back into position, still letting out his war cry, and Randall wonders what the hell that was. The audience starts laughing, saying he dodged by rolling and calling him skilled. Some of the priests watching say that's one way to do it, but it's not what they expected. Karnak then throws his shield away, saying he doesn't even need it anymore, and says Randall is as slow as a turtle, and that a muscular pig like him dared to call himself a knight. Randall starts getting pissed, calling him cheeky, asking if he's mocking him, saying he'll make sure he can never open his mouth again. Karnak smiles, telling him to try his best and takes a stance. Randall is surprised, recognizing it's the sword technique of the Piat, just like some of the others. Since it's the sword technique of Martial King Leo, some of the citizens say it looks like their lord is using the Martial King's techniques, and he might actually win. Randall laughs, saying he almost fell for the taunt, and he just needs to stay calm and focused, since the Martial King's sword techniques can only be used by geniuses with real battle experience, and he's far from being able to use them. He doesn't know how he managed to learn it, but if he thought it would guarantee victory, he's wrong. At least, he praises the effort and points his sword at Karnak, saying he'll do justice in the name of Alia. Karnak realizes his bluff isn't working and that it won't be enough to finish him off. Going back to when he was learning, he asks Baros if one day is really enough, and Baros tells him he just needs to copy it, saying he won't have to pick up a sword ever again once this is over, and he only needs to show his skill. Enough for people to think he's been training hard, since the real plan is elsewhere. Karnak starts blocking some of the attacks, but each and every one of them is very strong, and he says Baros never warned him about this. Karnak manages to exchange blow for blow with Randall, saying he still has to do what needs to be done. We see him crying manly tears, saying this is nothing, asking Randall if he really thought this would defeat the lineage of House Gestar. Randall wonders what this idiot is saying right now he's throwing his whole body at him. Karnak continues saying Gestar's sword will never fall, and the citizens start seeing him in a completely new light. They wonder why they ever thought negatively about him in the first place, and Karnak asks Randall if he's afraid. As the citizens sit and start crying tears of respect, Baros smiles, saying he's not taking any direct hits and all the time he spent beating him up is paying off. He's always had a talent for talking bullshit, since that's all he's been doing to Randall since the start of the fight. Randall says he's too irritated to continue like this. He tells Karnak it looks like he's on his last breath, asking why he's chattering. He charges much faster than before, saying he's going to end it here. Baros says it's finally arrived and tells Karnak to get ready. Karnak realizes this must be the opportunity. Back in training, he explains that although he can imitate the movements without a proper strike, everyone will see through his attacks and he'll show him exactly what to do. He explains that Randall is going to go for his legs to finish the fight, and he's going to do it to limit his movement at just the right moment. He has to change his stance to a defensive one and plant his sword in the ground. Randall is caught off guard that he actually blocked it, and then Karnak immediately starts swinging his sword diagonally upward, which actually clashes with Randall's blade. He then quickly changes his grip and strikes Randall directly in the chest again. As Baros explains, it's called the double parry workout. Baros is forbidden from ever naming things again. As Randall's blood flies across the arena, we see Karnak extremely exhausted, and Randall laughs, asking if that's all he's got, since it was only a minor cut, saying a kitten could scratch him better than that. Karnak wonders if this is the end, and everyone else starts thinking the fight is already over and that miracles don't exist. Randall says he let his guard down and is sure his comrades will make fun of him. Karnak says he's risking his life right now, and he's still worried about him. He starts to smile, saying this isn't so bad, and he won't have to feel sorry for him afterward. Randall wonders what that strange expression is, and then we see from his cut a purple flame starts emerging, growing directly from his chest to the sky. The priest recognizes the aura instantly, and Randall starts coughing it up. Karnak charges, saying no matter what kind of dirty tricks he's using, he won't lose. Before Randall can even react, his leg is kicking toward Karnak as the necromantic aura wraps around his leg. He kicks Karnak, destroying the ground as he's sent flying through the crowd. They start wondering how a human can possess such strength and ask if the black aura is being controlled by him. Baros pulls out his Oscar performance, saying it's necromancy, and this must be the devil's power. The priest tells the knights then that they need to go defeat Randall, and they rush at him, telling him to stop this instant, since in the name of Alium they'll bring judgment and justice against impure beings. He asks what they're talking about as he swings, knocking them all down. The priest manages to reach him outside the arena, saying this is definitely necromancy and they need to stop him. Randall wonders what the hell is happening and what Karnak did to cause this. He sees Karnak smiling, saying he must be confused, but he shouldn't be causing a scene like this. He now starts closing in around him, trapping him. One of the knights tells the priest it looks like he's being controlled by her, but the priest says it's only because he's not skilled at controlling it and they need to kill him when the opportunity arises. They start yelling as they charge at him, thinking this is that opportunity, and Randall screams, saying no, and is impaled by all their weapons, making him cough up blood, and at the same time the aura dissipates around him as he falls to the ground dead in the arena. The knights tell the priest he's not breathing anymore and ask what they should do. The priest says they must send officials to the Deventor estate to investigate thoroughly, and a verdict has been reached. Deventor's fighter has invoked a dark power and yet dueled in this sacred trial. The other fighter, the Baron of Gestar, has claimed victory. Back at the estate, the knights say they've found objects. There are blankets and cloaks with necromancy symbols on them, and it's all over the estate. His sister pleads, saying all these were recently purchased from a traveling salesman. One of them asks what that suspicious medicine vial in Randall's room is, and she says it's nothing but a formula for hair growth that they bought from a merchant, as Randall has always been worried about going bald. Me too, bro, me too. One of the men tells her she'll have a hearing soon. A few days later, we jump back to the estate as Karnak asks Baros how it feels to eat a feast worthy of champions. Baros says it's amazing compared to what they ate while he was training. Karnak tells him, of course, it's a feast to celebrate their victory. Baros asks if it's okay to eat like this. Karnak says, for sure there's also a feast in the town square. Baros asks how he came up with such a spell. Karnak says he didn't have to do anything. It only worked as well as it did because of Randall's personality a whole month ago. We see Baros asking how he plans to use necromancy, and Karnak tells him to listen. It's the same whether he dies while getting caught, using necromancy, or during the trial. It would be better if one of them used it. And surely he won't use it. Randall will. Baros asks what he has in mind. Karnak says he'll have to put on a show. And with how far away the officials are, he should be able to fool them. In a situation where they're fighting, it'll be difficult to know who's using the spell. It's an incredibly strong, high-level necromancy spell, so even the Order won't suspect he was behind it. There's just one problem. If he wants to do this, he needs his opponent to spill some blood. But with his current abilities, he doesn't know if his sword will even get close. Baros tells him to wait. If all he has to do is make him bleed, he's got it. Of course, that's not what happened, and Karnak says he had a terrible time. Baros asks if he's not glad. He put so much effort into it. Baros says there's something weird. Randall would have easily won without the necromancy, but somehow they managed to escape any suspicion. And he asks about the investigation against the Deventor family. Karnak says they were convinced he used it. Baros asks why. We jump to the great temple of Elium, specifically the Jezeli branch. The high priest asks the guy from the fight to report everything that's been confirmed. He says from the experience in their investigations, they're sure it wasn't just any necromancer, and that using the fragment of the transcendent, the goddess warned them that the attributes match perfectly, since it's the darkness of the apocalypse. Karnak smiles and laughs, saying it seems luck is on their side in this life. He and Baros start jumping around, saying the world is on their side. Baros says then with the Deventor family gone, there are many powers that will try to seize the mine. And Karnak says that's why he needed to strengthen his necromancy. In the first place, Baros asks what his plan is if the Order finds out, and he says that's why he needed to find a way to use it without being discovered. Karnak is training inside a magic circle and says he needs to focus as an aura enters his hand. He starts talking about how he's absorbing the negative energy from the moonlight and also from darkness. He has to summon the corrupt energy and filter it, collecting only the pure energy that remains. Finally, after reprocessing it to create magic, we see the black aura turn into a reddish flame, and he says this is perfect, since it actually worked, and this is called chaos magic. We jump to the training area as Baros is fighting someone, saying it's been 3 months since he started training as a soldier to become an official knight. No cap, but the problem is that the soldier's skills are pathetic, since he's just fighting a veteran soldier called Jigamon who's extremely gassed while Baros is not. He tells Baros to stop. They should finish here for today. Baros responds yes and thanks him for dedicating his time, and Jamin laughs, saying that embarrasses him. It's him who needs to learn from him, and he's grown at an incredible pace and will soon be Gestar's strongest knight. Baros says he still has a long way to go. Jigimon calls him modest, saying he'll definitely be a good knight, and the soldiers are having drinks together, asking if he'd like to join. Baros says sadly he's been assigned an important task. Jigimon says then he should try to come tomorrow. Baros agrees and says goodbye. We see him bursting into the room, telling Karnak it's snack time, only to narrowly avoid certain death. Karnak tells him to knock first. Baros asks what that technique was, saying it didn't look like necromancy. Karnak says he's sharp, and it's hard to consider it necromancy. It's more like mana, as he starts showing the red aura floating around. Baros says you can only use mana if you change your power. Finally, we get some lore and learn there are 4 ways to transcend human power in this world. A knight's battle aura, a mage's mana, a cleric's divinity and necromancy, which deals with the force of darkness and death. The transcendent force accumulates only the energy that's suitable for your body's force, and once you've accumulated enough, it'll transform into power. Since a power is optimized based on what best suits the user's soul and body, you can't use another power once your soul has already received one. Then Baros asks how Karnak changed it. He says he didn't, rather it's just the second stage. Karnak explains, further, like necromancy, which uses death energy and corrupt energy. It's literally super dirty, which is why it worked well for him since he had a rough upbringing. But there are foods made using nasty methods, like cheese, that have also been processed, so they don't feel gross or dirty at all, by filtering out the original negative emotions, like hatred and resentment, leaving only the pure energy of darkness and death. He transformed it into mana, and that's how his chaos magic was completed. By its appearance, it looks very similar to normal mana. Karnak says at least that's the name he gave it. Baros says he doesn't care, he didn't ask. But it looks a lot like mana, and Karnak says it'll seem fine to pretend to be a mage from now on. Baros asks if he'll be able to mimic the amount of power he had when he was the king of death with just this chaos mana. With great power comes way too much responsibility, and he's not about that, Uncle Ben BS. All he needs now is enough power to protect his territory. We jump to the western forest of their territory, as we see some dead wolves that have been taken from the mines, and Jigimo tells everyone to prepare to head back and he'll make the report himself. A wolf attacks him by surprise, and he's too slow to react. But luckily Baros jumps forward, taking down the wolf and saving Jigimo. Baros tells him he arrived a bit late and asks if he's okay, and Jigimon thanks him, saying he feels calm, having an official knight here, and Baros laughs, saying it hasn't been long since he became one and it feels awkward and embarrassing. But he remembers Jigimon mentioning how the monsters are strange. We learn the wolves are called snarlers, and they've become at least twice as strong. And there's a rumor going around. Baros asks about it, and Jigimon says it's called the goddess's oracle, the oracle of destruction that the 7 goddesses who protect the world and humanity sent to the order. The Void 1089 0056 56 400 0056 58 133. It'll be a darkness that erases light, a darkness that blinds life over time. Difficulties will arise, and wrong beasts will gain wrong power, and the dead will awaken and walk the wrong earth. The king of death will descend and paint the world with blood and tears. It'll become the end that speaks of destruction. After the goddess's oracle, monsters from a nearby continent went berserk and necromancers became uncontrollable, causing accidents across the world. The religious orders of the continent announced the oracle to prevent chaos and began combating them under a goddess's blessing. To protect the world, Baros tells Karnak such an oracle didn't exist before their regression and wonders why the past keeps changing. Karnak says it's annoying, but he doesn't have enough information. Baros says the rumors are totally about them and asks if it's related. Karnak says the time period doesn't match up. The oracle was from way before they went back in time. Baros says that's why the Randall incident went so smoothly, and surely they have to be the cause of this. Karnak says he doesn't know who the Death King is here, but wonders if destroying the world is that easy, saying it wasn't for them. Baros says there are many heroes, and surely all of humanity will resolve it themselves. Karnak decides to trust the heroes to deal with the Death King, and they should just stay here and enjoy their lives in this territory. A week later, a man appears who introduces himself as part of the Latiel order that serves the sun. Karnak says they're screwed. He says they learned a necromancer was active in the city of Iratuya near Gestar, and believe he's hiding in a nearby forest, so he'd like to request a guide who knows the path well. Baros looks at Karnak, praying to God he can read his thoughts, and Karnak puts down his cup, saying there's no way he could refuse. Matters related to a goddess. Baros hates him, and Karnak says he'll send someone quickly, then says goodbye. Baros barks at him, saying he thought they weren't going to interfere in worldly affairs. Karnak says it's a good opportunity to get a sense of the situation. Baros asks what he's planning to do. Karnak says first, they'll catch the necromancer and get rid of him, since he'll teach him what real power is. Straight up villain vibes. That night we see the necromancer fleeing, wondering if he's lost all his pursuers, and he says he thought he'd finally stop living like a beggar. But they immediately started chasing him, and he'll make sure to get revenge. After surviving, that's instantly cut short by a bunch of small mini-suns that are like spotlights. He says he wondered why he could run so freely. Realizing he'd fallen into a trap, they tell him they won't forgive Boroto anymore and he must surrender. He starts releasing his aura, asking if they really thought he'd surrender. Just like that, and screams while channeling a specter. The men go to take out their protection charms, but they're too late, since the specter kills them immediately. Karnak watches from a nearby tree, saying this shit is driving him crazy, but it's really a sight worth seeing. His words and conjuring techniques are all wrong and it really bothers him. Baros looks bored as hell, saying he thinks they should start soon. Then he points, saying look, he ran as soon as he started talking and they need to chase after him. Karnak says they need to get ahead of him before they subdue him. The necromancer manages to escape to a cave, saying he spent more power than expected and should hide nearby. Then he decides to light a fire, but instead locates Karnak and Baros. Baros says they were really worried he'd be late. Karnak says this is his usual hiding spot. Baros waves and asks if it's his first time, as they both laugh. They sit down and the man asks who they are. Karnak says they're people who want to catch him. The necromancer realizes this isn't good and calls his specters that surround Karnak. He decides to flee using them to buy time, saying they brought this on themselves. Baros says there are quite a few and he can't cut them with his sword, asking what they should do. Karnak tells him to stay still since he wants to test his chaos mana. Outside the cave, the necromancer is running, saying that'll hold them for a while at least. He hears a loud explosion, turns around, only to see a reddish chaos mana explosion and specters being launched through the air. Karnak asks where he is running to, casting a spell called Concentrate and Explode. As we see him taking out the specters with many small fireballs, one for each specter, the necromancer is surprised, saying the mage is stronger than he thought, and at this rate they'll definitely catch him. He says he'll show them the true power of death as he summons an evil spirit. Baros says young people sure have a lot of energy, and Karnak wonders why he calls it evil spirit when he just calls it specter, calling him useless. The necromancer laughs, saying he can see the fear in their faces, and Karnak asks if he's freaking blind. The necromancer says it's too late for them to beg for their lives and launches his specter at them. Karnak doesn't even try to dodge and calls to the specter, opening his eyes, telling it to kneel, while releasing his necromancer aura. The specter bows immediately to the ground and trembles in fear. The necromancer is shocked that he's also a necromancer. Basically the Spider-Man meme. Karnak asks if he's only realizing this now. Calling him clueless, he starts releasing a green aura, saying he bets he doesn't recognize this either. Using a skill called misdirection, a giant green hand appears behind the necromancer. and Karnak says this is his specialty as he clenches his fist. It wraps around the man as he screams in pain. We see him on the ground, glowing blue just like Capel when Karnak asks him dream questions. And Karnak tells the man to get up and asks how he got his powers. The man says it was a stroke of luck. He was drowning his sorrows on the streets as usual, when suddenly a darkness from an alley enveloped him. An unknown power started coursing through his body, and he realized it was the authority of the apocalypse. Just like the prophecy predicts, with such power at his disposal, he didn't even hesitate, and using this power, he quickly became stronger, killed everyone who pissed him off, and snuck into a mansion. Karnak tells him that's enough chatter, and he's nothing but a random nobody. Baros asks if he's planning to mind control him, saying he has his own agenda. Karnak says of course, they need to clean things up, so he makes the man unalive himself. Karnak stares at his corpse, saying now's the time, and begins taking his power. Baros says he thought he should avoid dirty energy like this, and Karnak says he needs to investigate it more thoroughly. A search party will arrive soon, so he should only take a little to avoid suspicion. When he starts absorbing it, he realizes there's something strange. Baros asks if he's okay. Karnak shakes his head, saying there's something that doesn't add up. A few days later, there's a barrier. Baros asks if it's serious enough to put up a soundproof barrier, and Karnak says this is no ordinary matter. He looked more closely at the energy he collected that day. Baros asks what he found, and Karnak says he's the cause. Baros asks what the hell that means in the timeline. Karnak says he has no idea, but that power is definitely his. Baros asks how that's possible, and Karnak reminds him to think about why they chose regression instead of possession, since the bodies they possessed couldn't handle the spiritual power they had, and they couldn't find bodies that could handle it, so they abandoned their powers, separating their souls so they'd return to their original bodies to have a higher success rate. But he guesses his power didn't stay in the future, and left his living body using the energy to create the Astrosaya form, as they discussed before. But it created something that wasn't quite a body, or a spirit, and he believes his necromancy powers were tied to his spirit rather than his body. His powers crossed to the past, along with his soul, but his body, unable to handle it, released all that power. Baros is shocked that his powers also made it to the past, and Karnak says it must make sense. All that expelled energy became the darkness of the end. Baros sighs, saying if the power returns, it'll be enough to end the world. And now everything's pointless, and maybe he should try calling it back. Karnak asks what's the point of that? Baros starts getting really frustrated, saying they're screwed because of him. Karnak sighs, saying the result is clear. They won't be able to trust the world like they wanted, since they have to intervene. Baros asks what the plan is now as he sighs. Karnak says they need to search for the darkness of the end, and Baros says he guesses they'll be living off rations again. Karnak says he'll make sure they're well fed. Baros is super happy and says leaving here doesn't seem so bad, and maybe it's because they're not being chased, since he's enjoying the horseback ride. He says there are also no signs of bandits, which is good, and Karnak says they clearly seem to have some backing, so they won't touch them. And Baros says they left with the excuse of going to train, but they're just heading to the city of Dirat. Karnak says yes, that's where the last necromancer they caught got his powers, so there must be clues. And Baros says it still feels a bit reckless, since the darkness of the end won't just walk up to them, asking if he has some kind of tracking ability for it. Karnak says no, they have to do it the old-fashioned way, saying he surely remembers how he did it back in the day. If you watched until the end, comment 100K to let me know. I really appreciate you guys, and I'm currently working on a 100K special. Subscribe for more videos like this. Leave a like or a comment to help the channel out. Thanks for watching.